So we're back with David Crow and Willem Nabarro. So picking up where we left off, cheaper oil, weaker euro, does that really get inflation going and beat deflation within 18 months, really?
Well, that is effectively what Mr. Draghi is aiming for, the 18 months. But again, effectively, he kept it open-ended, so he can continue if needed as well.
But the immediate reaction really was that for instance, Spanish bonds hit record lows in terms of yields. So periphery certainly seems to be enjoying or cheering Draghi's decision. How long does the party last?
Well, this is effectively something where everybody's asking themselves the question. If you look at Spain, which is very, very interesting because you mentioned Spain, that's something where effectively we see what people call good deflation, because the risk of deflation is, of course, well, you think that prices will go down, 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 so you wait and you don't buy, you wait and you don't buy. Effectively, you're in this horrible spiral. The good thing with Spain is effectively, which was one of the bad pupils of Europe, the Spanish are consuming again. The Spanish government has done a lot which other European countries may need to follow. Mm-hmm. If we look also further out, and if you look at the different interest rate swaps and you compare that with effectively equity markets, you will see in history and also going forward, that normally the best investments are going to be the cyclicals. Mm. Now, we'll be looking at automotive at that moment. We'll be looking at construction and building materials, and for example, we'll also be looking at media.
But what about the banks? I'm curious about the banks because ultimately their net interest margins would get further squeezed if lending doesn't pick up.
If we look over the last 3 months, the banks have started lending again, not only to the consumer, but also to the corporates. And with this, well, the expectations are that banks will continue and lend more. The difference between the US and Europe is in the US, companies or corporates tend to borrow directly from the market, and in Europe they tend to borrow more from the banks. Now, of course, they know that the interest rates are low, the corporates, but at the same time, they will need to pay a spread, and the spread will always be more or less the same. So if the interest rates are at 8% or the interest rates are at 0%, the spread for the corporates are always going to be more or less the same.
But Willem, I mean, aren't banks just a normal cyclical play? I mean, I have a very simple mantra. I try and keep investing as simple as possible. And I say that when we enter a recession, banks always get hit. Mm-hmm. And as we actually sort of go into a recovery, banks make lots of money. So if we believe that the quantitative easing, the monetary easing in the Eurozone is going to help the Eurozone recover again, then of course, you just play the banks because the banks are going to make lots of money as the economy comes out of its bottom of the cycle.
No, exactly. No, that is what would normally happen. At the same time, you have to take into account also that the rules have changed a little bit. We have at this moment what they call Basel III.
In short, what are some of the top 5 names, top 5 banks that you would buy as a QE play, as a Draghi play?
Well, although they're not directly in Europe, it's not directly with QE, Lloyds would definitely be one of the banks I would be looking at. We would definitely be looking in France in Société Générale. There is a question, of course, of the exposure they have on Russia. And if you don't want to take that risk, then you want to look at Crédit Agricole. That would definitely be one of the banks as well. And another one, which is on the outside of Europe, we will be looking at, for example, Nordea, which is a very different animal, to be honest with you. And if you want to go back into the Eurozone, we will be looking at Erste Bank in Austria, which is a bank which is heavily undervalued as far as we're concerned. But more interestingly, probably names we do not know very well over in Asia, are what is happening in Italy with the cooperative banks or popolare banks, where we have seen that the law has changed. The Prime Minister, very young Prime Minister in Italy, Mr. Renzi, he has changed the laws, whereby we're going to see more merger and acquisition or consolidation of the banking sector.